Faster than a speeding bullet.
I ran until my muscles burned and my veins pumped battery acid.
More powerful than a locomotive.
An idea is like a virus. Resilient. Highly contagious.
Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
Hey guys, Jared Moon here, and welcome to the Better Humanology Podcast. Super glad you guys are tuning in today. So today we have Rob Scott, and I want to urge you to pay attention, drop everything you're doing, and make sure that you listen to this episode from beginning to end. Because to be honest, a big problem I struggled with for a long time, and something I still struggle with on a daily basis, things I might not even be aware of, is mindset. You know, what can you actually achieve? What can you really push yourself to do? Now, I've had a lot of great mentors, coaches, and people in my life who've helped me push through a lot of barriers. But I think that the biggest thing is awareness, is not even knowing that you have, some sort of mental limitation or barrier. And Rob Scott, I mean, that's kind of one of his specialties, is helping people identify that, maybe you have this negative thought pattern, or maybe you suffer from anxiety, depression, or maybe you procrastinate a ton. He really helps you identify these things. And I really, urged him before the podcast started, like, hey man, let's really focus on mindset. This has been big for me. I want it to be really big for the listeners. And so we did that. We talk a lot about mindset. And one of the things he brings up, and I won't steal any of his thunder here, but we talk about not like changing your perspective, and he correlates it to, or gives a metaphor of, you can only look through the lenses that you have on. So maybe you have a pair of glasses. Like, imagine you have a pair of glasses on. He's talking about most people are trying to fix, they see a problem and they're trying to fix it, with their hands or whatever. But what they don't realize is that they need a new pair of glasses. They need new lenses. They need a new fix that is not even the problem that's right in front of your face, even though that's what you're working on. You need to go back closer to the problem and fix the lenses that you have on. And that's your awareness, your perception of things, and a lot of the stuff that we talk about in this episode. Guys, this is a huge mindset episode. This stuff I really love diving into because I know, like I said, through having a lot of great coaches and mentors in my life, how changing your mindset can really change your life. And hopefully he gives you a good small taste of that. So definitely listen to this interview with Rob Scott. And I do want to urge you, if you haven't already, head over to into3fitness.com, sign up, get our free 7-day barbell NDOC program. You get me on video walking you through some workouts. You get an ebook and a lot of other cool stuff. So if you haven't done that, go to into3fitness.com, sign up for that. And then after you do that, listen to this interview, guys. Here is Rob Scott. All right, Rob, I am super pumped to have you on the podcast. I was just telling you before we hit record, man, there's so many different directions we can go. I was pulling up all this information about you, and I think opening your brain up for the next hour or so is going to be huge for me, just myself, and I hope it helps out a lot of the listeners too. My main priority there. But everyone knows how we start the podcast. Oh, sorry. So I just want to say thank you for being on the show. And then we'll get to the challenges, man. So first off, you have a fitness challenge for the listeners.
The way I think about fitness challenges, it breaks into like 4 realms for me, and I like to pick like one challenge at any one time to really focus down on that. So for me, that's like strength, mobility, cardio, or food, actually. And so like right now I'm working really hard to like be in ketosis right now for this month. So I'm actually like drinking some ketones and doing all that stuff, trying to like, nice. Burn a little fat and change over to like fat burning instead of sugar burning. But I also think it's like super valuable if somebody can focus on like cardio for a little bit, and that might be sprints or it might be distances if you decide to kind of dive in there. Big one that I'm going to be doing next in my own challenge is going to be mobility. So I'm going to get like yoga and like supple leopard kind of stuff to really open up hips and do that stuff. And then clearly like a strength challenge where, maybe it's a kettlebell thing or you start to go lifting heavy, something like that. So not to like avoid, but I think there's like these realms of really interesting challenges that you could almost like cycle through that would be really, really valuable for people to focus on from time to time.
I think that's awesome. And you think like 1 month at a time? Is that typically how you run it?
I like to, yeah. I think so. You sort of like you take the new month and you think like, what would be most important here for me to kind of grow? And it doesn't mean you totally ignore the other ones, but you bring a specific focus to one of them. So for me, the food one, I've been really focusing on that for a few months. So that really worked for me in January. So I'm stretching that out through, and now we're still into March, and I'm still paying attention to that. The one that I want to get to, and I haven't done really successfully yet this year for myself, is the mobility one. Like I'm really dying to find a great yoga class I love or something, just because I want to open up, my body a little bit more. But I've been doing great on strength and cardio and the food stuff for now. So
awesome.
yeah.
And are you in a state of ketosis right now?
I believe I am. Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I just got the blood monitor, so I'll be able to answer you more accurately later. But yeah, I'm going to give that a test. The strips work okay, and it's hard to tell the color all the time, but yeah.
Cool, man. Cool. Yeah, I've experimented with ketosis a little bit here and there, and I know a lot of athletes I have as well. So it's pretty powerful. All right, man. So how about a mental toughness challenge?
Yeah, I hope we get into this a little bit. I think that in general, human beings are often kind of lost in thought, and oftentimes we are lost in self-delusion in a lot of ways, whether that be limiting beliefs or whether that be just cognitive biases that we're really kind of being hustled by. And so for me, an awareness challenge is a way to like immediately within just a couple days affect your mental toughness in a huge way. And I could talk about this for a long time, but one resource that I have, which is something that I've recently put together just kind of as a gift to the world, is this 7-day back to breath challenge, where every day I give this really simple, easy, short audio that opens people up to a different kind of way to be self-aware differently. But whether you do that or any other way that you can kind of come to an awareness or a mindfulness or a meditation practice of some kind, I would highly recommend for a little while starting to play with your own attention and see if you can break away from thinking and move into the other realm of our being, which is experience, right? So people think like, how do I stop my thought? It's actually very easy to stop thought. You just need to move your attention to something that's actually going on in the moment that you're not judging. You're actually just experiencing like taste or your breath or what your feet feel like on the floor. And all that calms down this really over busy mentality that many of us are stuck in and constantly worrying or constantly feeling stressed, right?
Cool, man. So you think like just a great grounding exercise in the moment would be just whatever you're doing, try to fully experience like the physical sensation of something, and that would help you be more in tune, more aware?
Yeah, so there just is two dimensions, and actually different parts of your brain light up when you're applying, these different kinds of experience. So one is thinking, and we have this ability to just kind of think and think and think and think. And people think that that's really the whole quality of our life, that almost all of it is within thought. And that's really kind of being lost in thought. And so a way to ground yourself out of that is to start waking up this part of our brain that for many of us has atrophied quite a bit, which is this really beautiful experience of actually being present with the different aspects of what our life is. So, what does it feel like just to feel the breeze on your skin? What does it feel like to just be walking to your car without being lost in thought? And it's actually, a lot of people call it waking up, right? You can actually wake up into this really beautiful thing where the colors seem more beautiful and life itself becomes really, really rich and profound. And it starts to get us away from stress and overwhelm and feeling like we're not enough and a lot of the mental delusions that people it seems so normal because we're all kind of stuck in it. The news cycle that's just so loud and scary and overwhelming for many of us. You can leave that and actually just come into presence, and it's a way where you actually find contentment and happiness literally in this moment. But it also has benefits towards success. And part of the reason for that, just to give it a really, really short explanation, is most of what we're doing all the time is instant gratification type stuff. So we're trying to grab the sugar right away, or we're trying to just, watch the next Instagram video that goes by or whatever, just to hit, some little peptide in our brain that gives us a little bit of excitement. That long term never really leads to success, right? Success in any realm actually requires delaying gratification. So saving money instead of spending it, eating broccoli sometimes instead of sugar, going for a run when we really would just like to lay on the couch. All of those require this muscle in the brain that's capable of delaying gratification. Well, when you start to play with an awareness challenge and you actually grow some level in your brain, it actually grows the ability of your mind to defer over to delayed gratification, because the act of just following a thought and not kind of having any sense of breaking up with the thought, that's actually the most immediate kind of immediate gratification, because we just kind of stay with whatever's loudest to us. And the ability to drop thought and say, come back to your breath, that actually immediately is like doing reps for your brain, so that you grow this quality of being able to be distracted by something and not just totally fall prey to it. And you can actually grow this ability to have delayed gratification be a way of being, which allows you across all your habits to become stronger, better. It's easier to save money. It's easier to go to the gym. It's easier to do all those things.
Awesome, man. And how about a book recommendation?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I'm really, my favorite book for a while now recently is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And that he's almost like the grandfather of cognitive biases. And in that book, and it's not the easiest read in the world, but it's essentially about these two parts of our brain that are a lot to do with this kind of immediate, fast reacting brain that's like impulse and quickness and all that, and how sometimes that can be delusional. And then the second part of our brain that has more contemplation, longer term thinking, like it slows us down in thinking, and it just tells us a ton about how our brain's working. So I'm really interested in that. And then another one, since we talked about awareness earlier in a mindfulness challenge, I think it's been out for a long time, but it's a really, really fantastic book. It's just The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. If people haven't checked that out, you should definitely give that a read and just make that something that's in your wheelhouse.
Awesome, man. I will definitely check both of those books out. And thank you so much for throwing down the challenges. Now, how about an introduction for all the guests, or for all the listeners, on who you are, kind of what you do, and your background? Sure.
So my name is Rob Scott. I'm a master level coach. I've been, coaching people on performance and mentality and mindset and all these things for more than a decade now, full time. And, I think one of the things that most people find interesting about me is that some people might assume that, oh, you must have always been a really high achiever and all this different stuff. And it's actually furthest thing from the truth. I was horribly, horribly, horribly dysfunctional earlier in my life. And a lot of that was spawned out of a childhood that was really, really abusive and had a lot of drugs and addiction from just a really offensively early age. I was really badly abused for years, sexually raped, and just really tough stuff. And addiction and substance abuse was, I was playing around with that stuff when I was like 7, and it got, just offensively young, right? So I started to get addicted to that. I was lucky enough to be somebody who didn't have to try that hard in school to kind of skate through it. But I didn't really get very good at doing school, right? It was more like I was kind of the bad kid doing all the bad stuff. And what that ended up leading to in my young adult life was homelessness, in and out of jails and institutions, just living on the street. I also got really, really sick with cancer at one point, almost died that way. So I know what it is to be incredibly dysfunctional, mentally, physically, emotionally, just across the board. And then something happened where I really woke up, and I became very aware of how much of my limits were being created by my own thinking. And so, as one example, I was carrying around this huge victim mentality, which anybody at the bar that would listen, I would let them know like how tough I was and how much I'd been through and all this different stuff. But as I was laying that framework out in my stories and the way I thought about myself, I was inviting like more victim stuff, right? So I was inviting more bad behavior, more addiction, all that. And so I really woke up to this idea of like, wow, I'm like looking through lenses at the world that are distorting what's really possible for me. And it's my company is called Fundamental Shift. I really had this fundamental shift in how I looked at my own brain and how I was thinking. And so in that moment, I really kind of woke up and I started to get very different results. And so I ended up going from being like homeless to vice president of technology at this company with no college degree, no pedigree of any kind, but just through performance, right? Being able to do that. In just a handful of years, I was able to go up through the corporate ladder like that. And so people were asking me like, how'd you do that? And a lot of it was being able to get great results out of myself and also great results out of the people that work for me that I ended up becoming a manager and then a director and all this stuff. And I was really good at getting results out of people around me. And in about 2005, I started a podcast of my own and started talking about these. How do we evolve consciousness? How do we consciously evolve ourselves? Like what is what is mindset? What is hypnosis? What's this game behind that gets really good performance out of people? And I was shocked that people all over the world started listening and started asking me for coaching. And at the time, I didn't even think that coaching was necessarily a thing. And then I found out that, wow, I was coaching my dysfunctional parents when I was just a little kid, trying to talk them into ways of seeing things differently and, behaving differently and feeling differently in their lives. So anyway, I stepped into it way back then and immediately sort of left the corporate world to build this company that I'm running now. And for the last decade, I've just been building the systems that make it the fastest, easiest, way to take somebody and really give them an incredible breakthrough. And one of the things that I call that is identity shifting, right? We take somebody who's got this really, unoptimal self-concept, and in just a handful of weeks, we can shift that self-concept so that all these really profound limiting beliefs just fall away. A whole different sense of self kind of fills that up. And then all these behaviors that we want within that kind of come with the identity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so you're helping people shift or change, right? And so that's to be honest, in my line of work as a coach, strength and conditioning coach, I find one of the hardest things to do is everyone has, at least to some degree, a desire to be better or make a change or make a shift.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't have the follow through and they don't do it. And so what do you see through coaching people is kind of one of the main factors that helps people make that change, become that person? Yeah,
it's a great question. As a coach for a long time now, I can tell you that there's basically 3 realms that people come to me wanting a change in. Okay, and I'll describe what each of those are. Some people come to me and they want different events in their life, right? They want more money, or they want the bigger house, or they want some business outcome that's outside. And so they've got this clear idea of a future that they want in some different event. And they'll come to me and go, hey, Rob, how do I make that happen, right? Other people come to me and they're much more clear that it's their own habits that need work. So their own behavior needs to change. So they're like, look, I set goals for myself and I don't hold the promises that I make to myself. I don't stick it out at the gym. I don't do my marketing habit. I don't do whatever those things are. And so they want not just a different event, they'd like a different quality about themselves, and they want to behave differently out in the world. And then other people actually just come to me because they're kind of miserable on some level, and they go, look, I feel anxious all the time, or I feel depressed, or I'm angry and frustrated a lot. And so their state, like how they feel inside, isn't the same. And different coaches may approach each of those differently. Like a behavior coach might try to help you use willpower to, habituate these different things, like going to the gym or following a diet or whatever. And those are effective to a point. But what I really realized is that there's one thing underneath that creates change in all those realms. And so if you think about that, what happens is the events in our life actually come in and we interpret them in some way. And that interpretation is the thing that actually creates the state, how we actually feel about the world, right? And the way that we feel about the world is what influences how we're going to behave, right? So if I'm anxious, I'm going to behave differently than if I'm totally confident. And so if we could start affecting that state, that changes the behaviors that we do and what's attractive to us. And the behaviors that we do completely affect the events that we end up getting externally in our life, right? So this is actually kind of how time passes. And these are just different parts of what it is to be alive. But the part that's missing for most people is that interpretation engine, the thing that happens between your ears that is managing, what does this event mean to me? What is the meaning-making engine in my brain telling me? And because if it's telling me I'll never win, or I'm a loser, or I'll never really make money, or whatever that is, then that's going to completely affect your state. That's going to completely affect the behaviors that you do. That's going to completely affect the events that happen in your life. So where I dial in is all of those realms. I've got skills to work on all those realms for you. But the most effective, the one that you can change the quickest across the board, is actually learning how to interpret your world differently and have mastery over the meaning making that's happening in your mind.
Okay, and so it's almost like your interpretation of everything that's happening. And so I'm trying to think of a specific example in which this would apply. let's go to money making, for instance.
Sure.
So if someone had, they feel like, they could never make beyond a certain amount of money. Maybe it's,
Yeah.
I could never go beyond 6 figures or something like that.
Yeah.
So is it somewhere down the line in their upbringing? What have you seen that helps someone shift to be like, oh no, that's not my
Yeah, let's widen that out, because it's not just money making. It's literally like we have a level of identity that unconsciously to us is kind of telling us at what level we feel really comfortable performing in the world and just being in the world. So, if I did a visualization with you around money, most people don't realize this, but we would get to a level of money that feels unreal to you. It might feel like you don't deserve that much, or it might feel like that would be too hard to make that much. I don't even understand that. Like if I just started to say to you, you now make $3 billion every month, right? Some people just kind of, well, that's just absurd. I don't even know what that is, right? So what that tells me is that we all have some level in our identity that's like a glass ceiling that says this is an okay amount of money to make. This is an okay level of car to drive. This is an okay level of clothes to wear. This is an okay level of house to be in. I have a really close friend who grew up in houses that were that he was looking at with his parents to buy. They were all $100,000. And then later, as an adult and a friend of mine, he would look at houses that were $250,000 or $350,000 or whatever. He's going, these are all so expensive. Houses are $100,000. What are you talking about? And he had just gotten that programmed in. So the programming happens with the language of how your parents talked about money. It happens through what your friends said, how we feel romantically, how we feel confidence about our own looks and who we are, can be influenced by in 8th grade when you asked that girl and she rejected you in front of everybody. And now your subconscious mind wants to resist that embarrassment, that pain, that whatever. And so unconsciously, we take on these rules about ourselves of what's safe and what's dangerous. And that mix makes up your identity. Now, here's the deal. Most people's identity has been completely created unconsciously to them, right? It's been happening in the background at a level where you didn't give it authority to say that's the amount of money I'm comfortable to make, because you will make what you're comfortable making. Essentially. Now, I'm not going to tell you there's magic and just, all of a sudden you can just imagine you make $1 billion and you just make $1 billion. You also have to gain the skills to create the value to do all that stuff, right? But you will never make the $1 billion if you don't have a mindset that is comfortable making that kind of money. So step number 1 is to open up the possibility to yourself that this is even a reality for you, right? So let me give you a more tangible example about how identity kind of affects these things. And this is like a weight loss thing, right? So I've worked with clients who are really, really heavy and like nothing has worked, right? And so and I'll just tell this really short, there's a lot to this story, but imagine working with a woman who, when I get really honest with her about what she really thinks about herself, her real answer back to me is, I am a big fat loser, right? Like that's the truth underneath that she feels, because she's disgusted with herself. She's gotten to a level where she just doesn't want to eat any more sugar. She's like, no more cake for me, I'm done, right? And she can really decide that. But what happens is she wakes up the next day and she's fine through breakfast. She's like cooking eggs. She's doing this new thing. She feels good. But by lunch, all of a sudden that cake starts talking to her. And before you know it, unconsciously, she's literally putting cake in her mouth even though she doesn't want to, right? There's like this unconscious muscle. So what's happening there is your subconscious mind is way more powerful than your conscious mind, and it's driving way more of your behavior and choices than you realize. And it's been set up unconsciously to you based on survival and safety and things like that, okay? So this person, because it worked yesterday to eat the cake, and that worked in the system, her subconscious mind is like, hey, we eat cake. You never gave me like the other option. I didn't kind of okay this other option, right? Now, what a lot of coaches do is they will try to habituate a new habit for that person, right? They'll be like, let's eat broccoli for a month instead, or whatever that equivalent is, right? Let's eat healthy for a month. Now, when that eventually works, the only reason that worked, because you're not going to use willpower forever. Willpower will eventually like dissipate and you will fall back to what's normal to you, because we need willpower to do the things that don't feel like us. Right? We use willpower to go, I'm not a runner, but I'm going to use my willpower to go running with the hopes that one day I'll feel like a runner, that one day my identity will shift over and I'll be a runner. Because once you are a runner, once that actually happens, there's no resistance. You don't need willpower anymore. You're just a runner. You just put on your shoes and go running, right? That's it. So when we're trying to master it through willpower, it happens sometimes and it works sometimes, but you can tell by people that take on New Year's resolutions how many of them fail, how many don't really take it, because willpower, we are exhausted. We're using willpower all the time just to manage our own attention and deal with all the communication we do. By the end of the day, we're exhausted. We don't have a lot of willpower to apply. Now, it's a part of the game because sometimes you got to use your will to become something different, but way better is to go in and change the identity of the person. So back to the really heavy woman. If I take a heavy woman like that and I actually repattern her brain to where she goes, instead of I'm a big fat loser with her self-concept, she goes, I am an athlete. Okay, if she takes on I am an athlete and really takes that on, I don't mean fake it, I mean really patterns that in. Now she might go, I'm a 100-pound overweight athlete. I'm not a fit athlete, but I am an athlete. What happens with that is all the behaviors are in that, because how does an athlete eat? Well, an athlete eats, and if they have a little bit of cake at lunch, they might do more cardio later. It doesn't like kill their self-esteem or whatever, but in general, they probably eat healthier. An athlete is also active, right? So this person goes to spin class and starts really losing weight consistently. And you don't have to lose the 100 pounds before you start feeling better. As soon as you know you're on the right track and you're really showing up for yourself, you start to feel amazing in your life, and the results are coming at the same time. So this person, still 70, 80 pounds overweight, becomes a spin instructor because she's really inspiring to everybody, and she's the spin instructor at the front of the class. Before you know it, at the end, this person's like a triathlete, all that stuff, because they've changed their identity, right? They went in and changed what the subconscious self-concept was, and all the behaviors are wrapped up in that in a beautiful way. So somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur, if before that you're what I call a wantrepreneur, like you'd really like to be an entrepreneur, but you don't think you are, you still need to learn more, or you still need to study some course, or you still need to do whatever. If we can actually turn that into, I am an entrepreneur. I may not even have any clients yet, but I am an entrepreneur. Well, that changes everything, because an entrepreneur actually has a business plan. An entrepreneur actually hires people. An entrepreneur actually makes sales calls. And all of a sudden, those behaviors can be completely wrapped within that shift in identity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, this is really powerful stuff. And the reason I find it so interesting is because as a coach, me and my team, we could get amazing at marketing, and we could just sell more and more programs, get more people in. That's all great. But that only goes so far. I need people to do my programs, see success, and then just let that snowball. That's really the most important. You have to be good at a certain degree to marketing as an entrepreneur to get people in the door, but then you have to really take care of them, and that goes beyond, especially in the fitness world, it goes way beyond just this having the best program. I have to get into their psyche a little bit and help them change their identity to becoming an athlete. It's funny that you bring up that example. That's actually an exercise I use with a lot of my clients is treat yourself like an athlete. Like an athlete is going to set aside time for, training and mobility, recovery. An athlete is serious. You can't just be like, fitness is something I do on the side. But I want to maybe peel that onion just a little bit more. And because you mentioned things at the beginning, you talked about some meditation, hypnosis, and things like that. Are those some of the tools that you use to help someone shift that identity? Because I know it can't be as simple as like, a snap of the fingers and my identity's shifted. Like, what are some of the tactics you use there?
It can be. It doesn't have to take that long. But yes, you're right. There are steps to this. So, excuse me. If we break it down into 3 steps, the first one is awareness, right? If you're not aware of these, well, actually, let me back up if it's okay. Do I have a second to kind of explain one other idea? I think it's really valuable. I talked about lenses, I think, for a moment. I just want people to like consider lenses, right? I'm wearing glasses. You might wear contact lenses. You've probably used a microscope or a telescope, right? So the function of a lens, literally just what a lens is it alters what we see, right? And that could be beneficial for me, like my glasses are helping me. But if I put on almost every other pair of glasses that's ever been created, chances are they're going to really distort my vision, okay? They're going to really hurt how I see. So, might make it closer, might make it farther away, depending on what we need the lens to do, right? We can create a lens that can alter what we see. But the second function of a lens that most people don't think about is that lenses are built to be invisible. Okay. Meaning that if I have scratches on my glasses or raindrops cover my glasses, they no longer function. And as soon as I start considering the lens itself, it's not doing its function of altering what I see. Right.
Right.
So what happens is our thoughts and our beliefs that are happening in the background unconsciously for us are like lenses that are happening all throughout our day. And so we're constantly looking at the world, and we have these lenses that came from when our heart was broken in middle school, or when someone called us fat, or when someone said you'll never be successful, or when our parents had all this passive aggressive behaviors around money, or whatever that we've taken on that we didn't even know we took on. And it's altering how we see reality, how we see ourselves, how we see what's possible. And we don't know it because, like a good lens, those beliefs are built to be invisible to us, because our beliefs personally, and I don't just mean like religious beliefs or any of that stuff, I mean the beliefs that to us feel like truth, right? Because to us, beliefs are the things that we just believe to be true, right? And we're not really investigating them. So for many of us, like that heavy woman that I was talking about, we have these behind the scenes opinions about ourselves that might come up really late at night when we can't sleep and we're worried about something of, I'm really not popular. People don't really like me on Facebook, or, I don't have the skills to run this business, or I don't whatever. Now, these don't have to be 100% true to be limiting to us. They could only be like 1% true, and they're still kind of like bad software in the system, like ruining our brain, right? So lenses are affecting everything. The fundamental shift that I was talking about before is getting outside of that, looking through our lenses and gaining the awareness to consider the lens itself in our thinking, to say, is this a valuable lens to me? Is this something that's augmenting me in a good way, or is this limiting me in some way? So if you have the limit of you're only worth $100,000 house, I would suggest that that's a limiting lens that you're carrying, and you might not even know you're carrying it. It's just kind of a way of being. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. So this is where a lot of our delusion comes from. There's other delusions like cognitive biases, which are, efficiencies that have helped us through evolution, but on a case-by-case basis can be really limiting to us in different ways. And we're learning more and more about those all the time. There's a lot of the fact that we think we're dealing directly with reality, but we're not. We're actually dealing with a mind that is a reality creating machine. And so most of the things that people are thinking about themselves and the world are not direct truth experiences. We see the boss at the end of the hall look at us, and we attach a meaning to that, like, he or she looked at me mean, they don't like me. And we might worry about that for like a month, and then that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's changed our behavior so much because we're so nervous about it that we don't focus on what we should focus on, and we're going in and being annoying because we wanted to get them to like us. And eventually they're like, you got to get out of here. And then we go, see, they really didn't like us. And actually it was created by us, right? It wasn't this big thing at all. And so, resistance to doing sales messages, or how you market your business, or even how big you think your business can become, right, is potentially a lens that you're not even seeing or challenging. It's just a default that you kind of assumed somewhere along the line. So to come back, right, that's part of where these limits come from. And I don't know that I gave it enough time, but this happens to us with, a critical parent, right? You could parent a child, and if they get a B, you could love them up and say, hey, great job. Like, B's really good. Try better next time, which might be really supportive and loving. Or somebody could just be like, why didn't you get an A? What's wrong with you? Like, you should be better than that. What happened there? And we might not ever attribute that has been affecting our self-image our whole life, but it very much could, right? It could totally limit kind of what we think is possible, or how we feel about ourselves, or what we feel comfortable even trying in our world, right? So if we're unaware of that, we will never get past it, because these lenses are going to be affecting us and we don't even see them, right? If you never consider that your business could be bigger than $500,000 a year or something, if that just feels like all it could ever be, and you just never ever challenge that, and you're unaware to even challenge that, then you're living with a glass ceiling that you can't even see, and you'll never get out of it, right? So back to the steps, right? Step one is awareness. Step one is starting a relationship with your mind where you start to investigate, what are these thoughts that I'm thinking? Instead of just having the thought and letting it totally have its effect, which if I think I'm a loser in one moment, like, do I want to let that have an effect, or do I want to notice that and go, oh, that's just a thought. Like, that's not reality. That's just something that popped up for me, right? So step one is awareness. And I like to quote a Tony Robbins story about that to kind of explain what that looks like. If you could imagine, see, awareness itself can be curative, right? All by itself, just becoming aware of a limit that you have, if you weren't aware of it before, that can become curative. And let me explain what I mean by that. So just imagine that you and I are in an auditorium and there's like fold out chairs everywhere, maybe in a gymnasium or something. And maybe we're watching a speaker on stage and all of a sudden all of the lights go out. And I don't mean just the lights and there's some other lights, like it's pitch black. And all of a sudden some loud voice says, you need to leave the building now. And we don't know why, but we got to get out of here. So all of a sudden, like people are maybe some frantically, they're pushing chairs around, whatever. Now in the dark, you and I could try to navigate that room and we might do okay, but we wouldn't know exactly where to go. We'd probably be bumping into chairs. We'd probably be going really, really slowly. Let's say halfway across the room, all of a sudden somebody turns the lights on. And now we go, oh, this is fantastic. I can navigate the room. I'm now aware of the challenges that I'm facing. And that makes me much more capable to walk around chairs and go much faster and find the door to leave. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So awareness is the first game that we have to play. So one way of that is to do a back to breath challenge, right? That would be one way so that you can start seeing, like, what is my mind even thinking? And if you realize, oh, I can't even stop my thoughts at all, like I'm not capable of that, then I would say that you're somebody who's lost in thought, you're not abnormal. That's most people today. But that is not a strong mind, right? That is not a mind that has the capacity to place itself somewhere and focus, to be really present and be in the joys and the fun that's happening, right? It's a mind that is literally lost in thought, like can't turn it off, right? So step one is to gain some mastery over like what is thought, what is not thought, how many of my thoughts do I need to believe, et cetera, right? And so clearly there's a process to do that when you work with me. There's a process to do that if you go learn meditation anywhere. There's also things like this. Somebody right now, say they don't want to meditate at all. Another way to become aware would be to get really honest with himself, just like I asked that heavy woman to do. Write down, like, what are your real limits? So for you trying to get people to become athletes, right? That could be a very consistent identity that you want to help them do. But if they, underneath the am I an athlete or not, have an identity of I'm a loser, I fail at things, right? Like I fail all the time. I lost the girl in 8th grade. I lost the money last year in the stock market. I lost my job. I'm a loser, right? You put athlete on top of that, I'm a loser is going to win. It's just going to be this shaky foundation that they're going to be like, well, I'm going to fail at athlete too. So a more holistic understanding of like, what are the real limits that you're dealing with? So sitting down for 10 minutes with a sheet of paper and being really honest about things that you don't like maybe saying about yourself consciously, but you look for like, what do I say about myself? Like what, do I say like, I'm not talented, I'm not smart, I'm not whatever. And you're not looking for the positive stuff. You're just looking for like, what are the negative things that I kind of feel about myself? Okay. That would be a form of awareness. And if you can actually externalize those rather than having them be invisible in the background, you leave the darkness and you start to go, oh, like I know what I'm doing here. Okay. So that would be step one, awareness. And obviously I could talk about that for longer, but we need to become aware of what we're even dealing with. Okay. Now, level 2 is imagine you and I are back in that auditorium, the lights are on, but we actually get to the doorway and it's got chairs everywhere. Like just being aware of the chairs is not enough then, because if we still have to leave the room, we're going to have to affect the chairs, right? We're going to have to do something with it. And you might have just felt if I say, hey, list out all your limits on a piece of paper, it might feel like, oh, well, being aware of those might help a little bit, but you're also like, well, that I didn't change them, right? Like at some point, if they're really persistent and they're really negative, just being aware of them doesn't take it far enough, right? It's better because you can realize, oh, there I am doing my limit again. That's not a real thing. It's just a limit. But level 2 is to challenge these, to actually think about how would I rewrite these? And it really requires a sense of almost like self-love, because if somebody, I've been with so many people that will actually just argue for their limits. I would do an exercise like that and say, what do you think about yourself? And they'd say, well, I'm a loser, I'm a whatever. And they'll sit there across from me and go, I'm a loser, Rob. No, really, I am a loser. And I go, that's fantastic. I don't care if you have been a loser, because we've all lost at stuff, right? If that's all we're focusing on, we could all bring on the identity of I'm a loser if we looked at all the times where, we didn't show up or we didn't do a great job. But that's not useful in this moment, right? So what I want them to do is I want them to realize that's not a permanent identity. That's just stuff that maybe happened to them along the way. And what would be a more useful identity now? So for each of those negatives, you can actually think, what would be just a more useful way to think? I don't even know if I can think it, but what would be a more useful way to think, right? So instead of I'm a loser, maybe it's like, I really love myself. Instead of, I'm not a talented athlete, like I love being an athlete. Instead of I'm not good with money or I'll never have a lot of money, I love when I make money, right? Now, it's important to think about how you create those or how you think about those, because things like the law of attraction and The Secret slung a lot of BS at us for a while there. There might have been some good things in it, but a lot of it was, I'm a billionaire, I'm a billionaire. I can tell you right now that if you just start telling your subconscious you're a billionaire, it's going to go, no, you're not, you're a liar. And it's just going to solidify into a lot of those limits, right? So there's a way of wording these where they're really acceptable to your subconscious and they're just more useful, right? That's like a really important distinction. And it's part of what I work with people to do for them, right? But level 2 is essentially you become aware in level 1. Level 2 is you go, what's the change I really need to make here? What's the identity I really want to have? How do I actually want to talk to myself? And then level 3, what I do with people is I repattern those into your subconscious, right? So I teach you this repatterning technique. I take it into where you can really take on these new ways of thinking and make them what I call normalize them for the subconscious, because the subconscious is doing all these repetitive behaviors solely to protect you, even when they're ultimately detrimental to you. And I can explain a little bit more about that. But just to wrap up this idea and stop babbling for so long, step 1 is becoming aware. You've got to know what you're fighting. Step 2 is to figure out how you need to change those in a way that's going to be acceptable. And then step 3 is to actually repattern those into your identity, into your subconscious, so that you take them on. And that really is creating a different person, right? It's literally creating a different level of you that's optimized, that puts down limits and really, really changes the game.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I've done a lot of research on mindset, and I don't think I've ever had someone break it down in such a systematic way. So I really appreciate that. It was really helpful.
I feel like can I say one more thing? Because I feel like I've breezed past like why the subconscious runs so much. I think I don't want to like give that as a reason and then not sort of back it up. Our conscious mind, and if you talked about marketing earlier, we know as marketers and people that need to sell that like human beings are generally consciously motivated by avoiding pain and moving toward pleasure, right? Like that feels like the basic motivational structure. For our subconscious mind, it's actually probably more accurate to say it's trying to avoid pain and death, and it's trying to move toward the familiar. It's actually not as interested in pleasure. It's really only interested in not dying. It's really only interested in survival. And so if we can also make the assumption that the subconscious brain is way more powerful than what your conscious brain is, that's part of the delusion of our humanness, is that we feel like we're really running the show. But unconsciously, your subconscious will give you different decisions, different behaviors all the time that go against what you know to do, right? That's when we go, all right, that's it. I'm not eating the cake anymore. And then by lunch, we're eating the cake. It's because our subconscious drove us to do it. It's not because we stopped wanting to do it. Our conscious mind was still like, yeah, but our hunger hormones went off and all these different, chemical systems in the body happened. And this whole unconscious process behind the scenes said, no, we have cake. That's what we do at noon. And all of a sudden you have cake, right? Like that happens again for you. So the motivation between the subconscious mind is really, it's only interested in survival. It wants 2 things to survive: your body and your identity. Okay, so it's persisting that sense of self and your physical body. And a way to illustrate that is if you're sitting on train tracks and all of a sudden you turn and there's a train coming right at you, you don't have to consciously think like, I need to get out of the way. Your body will literally jump for you in a protective way to like move you from that train, like a bus in the street. You're like, oh, like you move, right? Like that. That same system is what's at play in all these other micro decisions throughout your day. There's very much unconscious behavior drivers going on. A more explicit way to explain that is if you think of, like, many people look at battered women and they go, why do they go back? Like, that's not a pleasure-seeking behavior, right? It's not pleasurable there. Why do they go back? Well, it's because their system underneath, unconsciously, they are way more comfortable with what's familiar to them than what's actually potentially way more pleasurable, right? Because it's unknown out there. The difference is I don't know if I can survive out there. I don't know if there's a meaner guy out there. I don't know if it's a cold street and no home out there. Here, I've just got Tom, punching me every couple months and, I haven't died yet, right? So to our conscious mind, it doesn't make sense because it's like, well, go live with your mom or do some other thing. But to our way of being, it's like if it worked yesterday and we didn't die, the subconscious mind goes, oh, that's a win. we can do that again, right? And it will pick the familiar way more often than it will pick change and new and all that stuff. So as young people, we're much more exploring and interested in doing all this different stuff. As we get older and we've had these different pains, oh, that hurt, and talking to that girl hurt, and trying to make money was a failure, and doing this, all of a sudden we shut down. We find ourselves in a career that seems kind of safe, even though we don't feel alive and we don't feel excited about it. And our subconscious mind is helping us just continue these habits that sometimes, aren't even the best for us, but in the moment they're not dangerous, and so we keep choosing them. And so growth and change is a real affront to that muscle of the subconscious that's trying to keep us the same and protected and, ultimately smaller, because it's just trying to survive and reproduce. It's not trying to be joyful and happy. That's all working in the conscious mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man, that's perfect. I don't think I've ever heard that before. That makes a lot of sense about the unconscious mind, and it's also really simple.
Yeah, and so you asked at the beginning, like, what's the reason that this change is hard and all that stuff. I think that's probably the most compelling argument to what our resistance to change is.
That's perfect, dude.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to shift gears on you 100% here. This is the book question we throw out there, and our listeners love it. We always surprise the guests with it. So say there's a nationwide curriculum implemented, and the president calls you up, and he says, you are responsible for one chapter of the book.
Yeah.
So every single child in America will have to read your chapter and be tested on it and pass before they're allowed to graduate high school and pursue any sort of further education. So what would your chapter be about?
Super easy, man. It would be back to breath. It would be gaining that mastery of leaving thought to understand experience and waking up the mind to have a fuller, it's literally a next level of consciousness for us. And it's very simple. And every single person listening to this has the capacity to do it in a moment. Most of us just aren't doing it. So what I teach in that Back to Breath challenge, I would make a chapter about that. And that's what I would teach for sure.
Okay, I have a question about that. So it seems like, I've had a lot of different guests on the podcast, and people always mention kind of what we're supposed to be and then what we are as far as actual human beings. Like we strap shoes on our feet, and so we lose the ability to, navigate, or our feet get weaker, or,
sure,
we're supposed to eat a certain way, or we're supposed to play, we're supposed to be outside, all these things. Do you think that breath is one of those things that comes more naturally to a human being at the beginning of life, or is this something that's just like a learned behavior that you have to teach yourself because it's not very instinctual?
I think that it has. I don't think it's something that we lost. I don't think it's something that technology took away from us. I think that if we look at our evolutionary history, our survival has been primary. And with that, I don't think that we even directly interface necessarily completely with truth, right? As I've mentioned, I think that we're very much in a lot of delusions that, if you look historically, have been huge advantages to us. Like, so fear, as an example, and anxiety, huge advantage to us, like kept us alive, got us out of things. But today in our world, when we're not in as much danger, that anxiety level is unnecessarily high, right? So to understand that, we can learn that there's a different capacity of our brain, and we can kind of wake up. This ability of our brain to wake up in the way that I'm talking about, which is really just adding this quality of presence, right? To leave just this incessant connection to time and thinking, and really embody the now in a way where we feel what I call arrived, right? You just feel really embodied and alive. That's been available to us for thousands of years. It's not anything new. There's just new teachings on it, and new scientific support for it, and new reasons to do it that make more and more sense as we're having all the technological advancements and the challenges that come with that, and all that stuff. So yeah, I don't think we've not devolved at all. I think we're continuing to evolve. I think more and more and more of us are awake all the time. But this is something that, when we were much more primitive and afraid and trying to survive, I don't think it would have served us in the same way to be like deeply present then. I think that anxiety really served us then. I think we were just trying to survive in that form. And then, before that, if we were, way back at multicellular creatures at some point, if we're going to, go the evolutionary route, presence isn't a thing then, right? This is an emergence. This is something that's emerging. It's been around for a long time, but it's still kind of new. And it's not the average. This will make you different in your family. This will make you different in your business. This will make you a better performer across your life. So for most people walking around, we're still doing this almost prehistoric anxiety dance with our living. And there's an option for us to literally crack open this other quality of our mind. And we don't lose. Here's another way to think about it. Most people are truly lost in thought, right? They don't control their thinking controls them. What I'm introducing them to is a way to gain a fundamental shift in their consciousness so they can actually turn thought on and off, and it immediately increases the quality of their thought. So you will have better, more creative thinking. You will be more organized in your thinking. You will be more able to navigate thinking and not thinking, which is a whole nother level of consciousness for people, if that makes sense. So, rather than being like woo-woo and weird about this is a very easy to do thing. It's incredibly tangible. And a lot of the traditions that have taught this leave people sitting to figure it out themselves for 10 years, and eventually they pop and wake up. We can talk about what that wake up is 2 days in, and you can start to understand. It doesn't have to take 10 years to get there. It's available to you right now when you decide to take that on. So I think that's a long answer to your question, but hopefully that made some sense.
Yeah, man, that makes perfect sense. I know personally, I feel like I had a natural ability to not be lost in thought earlier on in my life. And then this is all in retrospect. This is not like things I knew going on at the time. And then hit the working world and things got a little more real. Add 2 kids, get married. Money is way more important. It has to be made, and then there was a time period, looking back at it now, that I know I was completely lost in thought, and I was confused about what was happening at the time, but I couldn't put a finger on it. Going back to the awareness, I wasn't aware of what was going on. I was just like, man, I used to be able to kind of detach and see what was going on, and now I'm just reacting to everything. I'm just constantly thinking, and it's been a long journey to try and to change that stuff. But man.
Well, I think you bring, first off, that's awesome, and what a great amount of awareness you bring to that now. I think you bring that up, and I think when our lives are simpler, when we're single and money's not as big of an issue and all that stuff, there's probably an invitation to be more embodied for sure. And somebody who's taken your path of working with bodies and physicality and all that, you're probably grounded and closer to senses and physical stuff than somebody who really is lost in thought and accounting or something that's really detached from physicality, right? So to your point, you totally can add complexity to the system and start to lose touch with any of that. We often take the word sensuality and equate it with sexuality, but I truly mean just sensual, meaning closer to your senses, right? Closer to touch and what's in the present, right? Which is your 5 senses. That's what's actually arising for us in any moment. So, when you can cut off the thought machine and actually come into presence, right? If you can do that as a skill, that's different than just happening to do it because your life isn't complex, right? So if you learn this as a skill, it doesn't matter how complex your life becomes because you have it as a skill, and that allows you, as I was saying before, to take on more complexity, right? Meditation actually leads to success because you're gaining mastery over your mind in a way that allows your mind to be more effective, more sharp. Your memory improves. There's, your telomeres lengthen. You age differently. It's healthy across the board in a ton of ways. I think what you were mentioning is somebody who didn't necessarily know that it was happening or why it was happening, but you just happened to be closer to presence because of the lack of complexity in your life.
Yeah, man. And before we move on to the quickfire questions and the last question of the show, given your level of experience and all the things you've done in your career, a question I like to ask occasionally is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
Man, no, I think this has been great. We went in a ton of different directions, but I think it's followed pretty much one path here. I just really want to help people wake up, right? I want to help people wake up from their own limits, from their own unconsciousness. And I know that when you gain a couple of skills in your mind, you can master not only your own identity, but success. It's like mastering the art of fulfillment and the science of success, right? That's what I'm about doing. And my vision for the world is just to evolve consciousness to a level where we can live abundantly and sustainably in a way that's almost a completely different planet than some of what we're living in now. And so I'm just excited to participate in that. And I think you asked me a bunch of great questions to do it.
Thanks, man. All right, so let's get to the quick fire question then. What's the hardest workout you've ever done?
Dude, it's got to be jujitsu, man. Jujitsu used to kick my ass quite a bit, more in the actual just workout stuff. I was doing CrossFit for a while, and that is, because I'm competitive and I really show up. I guess you could go slower at CrossFit than I did, but CrossFit used to kick my ass. But jujitsu will if I tried to do CrossFit for as long as I was doing jujitsu, like in a day, CrossFit would probably hurt me more. But jujitsu just used to kill me, like no doubt. Yeah.
Awesome, man. In your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
Without question, it's going to be meditation, but I have a distinction on that. Facing pain, actually trying to not run from pain, actually learning. So whether that's an ice bath or whether that's actually going back to deal with an emotional breakup that really hurt your heart, or whether that's in meditation, like the pain of detaching from a thought that seems really attractive or whatever. There's magic in gaining the ability, almost in a stoic sense, to deal with discomfort and pain in a sense. And what I would suggest is you don't actually have to suffer from pain. Pain is a sensation. It's a thing. If you punch me in the arm, there's going to be a tingling there. But it's my resistance to that actually causes the suffering, right? So suffering's optional. Pain comes and goes. But that said, the best activity for building mental toughness, without question, is meditation, some type of awareness practice. Everything we've been talking about so far.
Awesome, man. And if you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Yeah, my cheeky answer to that is gravity. Gravity
Awesome.
Gravity is the way, and really that is all you need is you pushing against that repeatedly over time. But if I had to pick a piece of equipment, I don't even know if I really believe this, but it struck me when that came up. It's what I thought of. I don't know why, man, but when I start throwing kettlebells around, it really feels amazing and it changes my body. And there's so much cool stuff you can do with them. So like if I had to take one thing, it would be, maybe like a 20 kilogram kettlebell, somewhere in the middle of not too heavy, not too light. And you could do a lot with a 20 kilogram.
Perfect, dude.
Yeah.
I agree. All right, dude, here's the question. So what is your best advice you have for becoming a better human? This is 100% open-ended.
Wow. If you don't gain mastery over your thinking, you will remain delusional in some sense. So without a doubt, clearly, if you don't take care of your body, you'll become physically sick. There's all kinds of other if you don'ts out there. But for me, I think that our life is happening in the meaning-making machine between our ears. And if you're living at any level of delusion of just, being worried or not seeing what's possible for you, I think that's the biggest limiting factor going on for us. And I think if you master that, you become superhuman to what you were before. And that's certainly been the case in my life, and it's been the case with thousands of people that I've worked with over the years. So gain mastery over your mentality and grow up in that way, and everything else falls into place after that.
Awesome, man. And I know that people listening to this podcast, you've definitely probably piqued some interest. So where can people learn more about you, your work, your courses, and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I'm going to give you 3 websites really fast. The first one, if you want to do a 7-day, super simple, easy meditation challenge, go to backtobreath.com. Awesome, just cool, free thing. There's a great Facebook community that comes with that for free. If you want to know more about me just in general, you can go to robscott.com and check that out. If you're specifically interested in identity shifting, you can go to identityshifting.com and learn more about that process there.
All right, man, perfect. And I'll link to all of that in the show notes for anyone listening. You'll be able to check out that, click on the links, or you can just go straight to the URL he mentioned. But Rob, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
It's been a total blast, man. Thank you.
your best. Losers always whine about their best.